Thank you, Honourable Chair. Honourable Minister, the question posed by Honourable Yako speaks to the issue of collusion, as you indicated, as well as the issue of conflict of interest, where a particular board member sits on an entity and then as a board member as well on another entity or business, where that particular board member may then encourage business interactions between the two entities or businesses, either directly or indirectly, in order for that particular member to benefit or company to benefit, materially or otherwise. The question to the Minister is, what are the other board members, both in the public-private sector, that the department is looking into, that the Minister is aware of, where such conflict exists, and what is the policy implementation of conflict of interest or where there's collusion to be found? What is the policy implementation phases where the Minister has found that to exist? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Thring, for that question. So this refers to cross-directorships. And there are two ways in which a cross-directorship arrangement could work. The one is where one person serves on the board of two competitors that are not related to each other. And in cases like that, the competition authorities keep a careful eye on it, particularly when a complaint has been raised or when they become aware of it. And of course, you can't prejudge the outcome of an investigation as the Commission. You've got to look at the facts of the matter. But the Commission would take the view that they would take that materially into account in determining an investigation on collusion. That, however, is different to an instance where you have cross-directorship in a wholly owned subsidiary of a holding company, as is the case in the question. And I had regard just to see to what extent is our law out of sync with what happens in the rest of the world. And there's an important judgment in 1984 in the US Supreme Court, which dealt with issues of antitrust. The Americans called what we call competition policy, they call antitrust. And the judgment specifically says, refers to the coordinated activity of a parent and its wholly owned subsidiary. And they go into the detail. And essentially they say, if a parent and a wholly owned subsidiary do agree to a course of action, there's no sudden joining of economic resources that had previously served different interests. And there's no justification for antitrust scrutiny. So I think it does depend on the facts. So much of the investigations we do is to apply the law to the facts. And in this case, as I indicate, cross-directorships between competitors do raise a flag for us. Cross-directorships of wholly owned subsidiaries.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Your time is now expired.
Thank you.
The next follow-up question is to be asked by the Honourable Thring.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. One of the many barriers of entry for new businesses in South Africa is the cost of electricity. Eskom has moved from being one of the most efficient and cheapest electricity suppliers in Africa to one which now holds the economy to ransom as the single biggest risk to the economy, with outstanding debt of some 454 billion. Does the Minister believe that the unbundling of Eskom into generation, transmission, and distribution is the panacea to the Eskom crisis, while maintaining a bloated management figures where senior managers refuse to undergo lifestyle audits and security vetting by the State Security Agency? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Questions in that one question, but thank you, Honourable Member, for that.
According to the rules, Honourable Minister, you may decide only to answer one of those follow-up questions.
We'll try to be as respectful as we can. There's no doubt, as I said earlier already, that administered prices can be both a barrier to entry, but also an anti-competitive factor as well. So that's the first thing. Secondly, not only the restructuring itself is not going to be the panacea. The restructuring, combined with financial measures, operational measures, a different culture, a different set of skills, and tougher management within the Eskom environment, can certainly over time begin to create an ESCOM that is actually supportive. And if ESCOM is not careful as an entity, self-generation within the private sector, if permitted by the Minister of Energy, will begin to create competition outside of this marketplace as well. So it certainly isn't a panacea. For example, the top management has been reduced from 21 persons to 9 persons over the past year or so, and similar work still needs to be done as the separation process continues. And as far as lifestyle audits and vetting is concerned, all these employees better comply or they must be disciplined in the appropriate kind of way. We know that there are ESCOM employees doing business in one form or another with ESCOM, which is not allowed by the rules of the game. And where appropriate, the ESCOM management must have the courage and the diligence to discipline them in the appropriate kind of way.
The next follow-up question is to be taken by the Honourable Thring.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Honourable Minister, the appointment of Mr. Director as the new CEO of ESCOM has come as a surprise to many. The ACDP has wished him well and noted that he must have been a very brave man to have accepted the position with the responsibility to turn the entity around with its 454 billion debt burden. However, 3 criticisms were leveled at his appointment, and you have to some extent answered some of them, so feel free to just answer the others. And I only have one question. The 3 criticisms have been he is white and therefore you as minister are anti-transformational. Second question, he's not an engineer and hence he will not be able to understand and solve some of the intricate technical difficulties at ESCOM. And then the third criticism was that he did not make much of a success at NAMPAC and hence South Africans should not expect him to turn ESCOM around.
Honourable Member, you are now running out of time. What is your question?
Criticisms? Can the minister respond to these criticisms?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Frick has a penchant for multiple questions. Indeed, Mr. Director is not just brave, he is a patriotic South African. And in our constitution, the principle of non-racialism is embraced as much as positive discrimination, if you like, is embraced as well in the Equality Clause in the Bill of Rights. Secondly, he is the one person who also said, I'll take a 20% cut in my salary. In today's world, few people will actually do that. The third, that I'm anti-transformation, well, I don't have to just stand here and justify myself, but I've got 40-odd years of activism behind me, and it's been part of a non-racial movement called the African National Congress, which is committed to transformation. He's worked for 20 years in Sasol, and he's got massive experience in working with engineers. Look at his CV and his record, and you'll see that. And those who've worked with him at NAMPAC are highly complimentary of his leadership. Companies do go through difficult patches. I'm not an expert on NAMPAC, but NAMPAC itself had to be massively restructured over the last couple of years under his leadership as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The next follow-up question is to be asked by the Honourable Thring.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Honourable Minister, South Africa is blessed with some of the largest coal deposits in the world. This should give us both a competitive as well as a comparative advantage when looking at the cost of energy generation in South Africa. So it is counterintuitive and illogical that we now have some of the highest costs of energy and ESCOM, where ESCOM could be saving some 4.5 million, it is estimated, per day, or 10 billion over the next 6 years if it adhered to NERSA's recommended price of around 350 Rand per ton delivered. Now, in addition, there's some 632 million owed by Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Mozambique. What has the success of the interministerial team been in negotiating the price of coal downward? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, as soon as we are ready, as far as negotiations are concerned, Minister Mantashe and I will report to you. But those negotiations, as I said, are in progress. And secondly, part of that is the formulation of that indexing system. So when next you have an opportunity, Honourable Member, please get my colleague involved as well so he can report to you on that. We'll look at the figures that you've actually given. I'm not sure about them. I don't have them at hand. But any effort to reduce the cost of coal is an important contribution, as I said earlier on, to the overall cost of electricity. As far as our neighbors are concerned, some have the capability to pay, others yet do not have the capability to pay, but Eskom is constantly engaging with them to ensure that they collect as much debt as they can. And in each case, we have to look at their circumstances, their ability to pay, and exercise on the one hand some pressure, but on the other hand some patience as well, because we want not just South Africa to develop, but the region to develop as well. But collecting debt, as you correctly point out, is an important exercise that Eskom must be mindful of.
Honorable Thring.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Minister, South Africa has one of the highest unemployment rates in the world, topping close on to 30% on the narrow definition of unemployment, and certainly the highest Gini coefficient in the world, speaking to the challenge we have of inequality. The central goal of the department is to grow our failing economy. So, Minister, how successful has the online business portal as well as the business process services been in addressing these challenges that we face in South Africa? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Thring, for that question. In fact, I would like to provide a bit of background information before answering the question. One of our challenges to increase levels of investment in the economy and create opportunities for small businesses, and my colleague, the Minister of Small Business Development, make sure that we constantly look at how to open up the economy for small businesses, is to increase the ease of doing business. And one element of that is how easy it is to register a business. Many entrepreneurs, especially smaller players, have found it quite tough in the past. It would take up to 40 days to register a company. Then you've got to register for tax. Then you've got to register for unemployment insurance and a range of other regulatory requirements. So what we did was we've created now a single online portal, and we've launched it in its pilot phase in the first week of November. And what this portal does, in one place, it brings together your ability to register a company, you register for tax, you register with the BEE Commission so you can get your certificate, you register with the Unemployment Insurance Fund, with the Workmen's Compensation Act, you can even register for your domain name. And so that means in the space of a couple of hours, you would be able to meet all of those regulatory requirements. So that's how we, in fact, are opening up the economy, making it easier for South Africans to participate in this economy, and wanting to increase the number of entrepreneurs in the economy. That's one example of a number of other interventions to make it easier to do business in South Africa so that we can grow the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.